Okay, let's get on with the fur and the eyelids, or the skin around the eyelids. So what I'd like to do first is the fur, and then I can base how dark I can go with the skin on the shade of the fur. Yeah, let's do the fur first. Going to get a 2B, making sure it's sharp. And I'm going to work on this transition a little better. And I am going to draw lines. And I focus more on the shadows now, so the shadows in between the hairs. Then I'll use the blending stump to do a bit of blending and create a whole base tone of the fur. Then I can pull out some highlights with the Tombow. So I'm really looking really closely at the direction of the fur growth. You can see that shadow here, quite far above the eye. And it goes around the eye like an eyebrow. And the shadows I put in a little darker right away. But I'm not pressing so much, so I want to make sure that there's still enough tooth to the paper to increase the darkness. I don't want to saturate the paper right away. So then the fur goes around, goes more horizontal like that, and then it goes around the eye. And I make sure to focus on the length of the strokes I make. Then we have a lighter area there above. And I'll probably do some work on this area too. This eyelid that you can see quite well. Then doing a bit of sketching. This is only the dark part of the eyebrow, like the shadow, and then above it you have the real eyebrow. I hope that fits on screen. First getting longer there as well, so my strokes are longer as well. I'm being quite loose with this so far. I can add the details in the next layers. Just want to map out the direction of the fur. And then let's work on the transition here as well, between the skin and the fur. You can see some very dark shadows. I'm being quite quick with my strokes. I don't want to think about them too much, because I want a natural effect. Then the fur is going like that. And then for the bottom of the eye, the fur is actually quite light here, as you can see, but you can see very dark parts in between the hairs. They are very dark. So I'm going in quite dark right away. I make sure to be random with them. So I don't want to place all these lines just straight next to each other. I want to mix them up and vary a little bit in the direction and the length and the darkness of these lines. Watch the direction of the fur. Goes like quite horizontally eventually. Then around the eye, just like above. Then it comes together with the fur from above the eye. And it forms a shadow. Okay, so I want to do a little bit of blending just to get a nice even layer of fur. So I'm taking my blending stump, going to start at the top and then just very lightly create a base layer. So this is a little bit of a shortcut. You can also do the fur with the pencils themselves, just the pencils, but I want to be a little more fast, so I just used the blending stump to do a base layer. Okay, and now I'm going to use the blending stump as well to create a base layer of skin. So there is still some graphite on the blending stump, which makes me able to do this. If you have a new blending stump that doesn't have a lot of graphite on it, you can also just do some coloring with graphite with an 8B or 6B and dip the blending stump in it, and then you get the same effect. Just use it as a brush, basically. I'm so sorry, I can't really talk today. It's quite late. I'm filming this at night, and I've already filmed for like 3 hours today. So then usually my talking is just not that great. I'm working in small circular motions. And I'm going to do this small highlights, like the really small highlights in the skin. I'm going to do that with the white jelly roll pen. The larger ones I'm going to draw around. I just take it all the way around. And then later on with an eraser I can pull out the lighter hairs. As long as I don't use too much pressure on the paper, the erasing will go pretty smoothly. So I work with a light hand all the time. Want to get some darker shading just below the bottom eyelid to give the eyelid some more shape to it. Okay, so I have a base layer now, but you can see on the reference that the skin needs to be a lot darker. So I'm going to get the 2B and also the 8B. First I want to darken up this top eyelid. Doesn't need to be completely smooth, can have some texture. Eventually I don't want to see any straight, tight lines anymore. Everything needs to be shadow. I want to focus on shapes now. Shapes, lights and darks, I don't want to see any lines. Alright, so with the 8B I'm going to darken up the bottom, as it's very dark here, as you can see. Going to work in circular motions again to already mimic the texture of the skin. Drawing around the largest highlights here in the corner of the eye. I'm going to define the shapes better later on. Back to the 2B to darken up the top side. Circular motions again. Going to focus on the highlights later. First I want to make sure that the base layer is dark enough. Actually here can be a lot darker as well. Also darkening that up. Okay, that's a little darker now. I still want the pupil, of course, and the very dark parts of the iris to be the darkest. So I think I'm going to leave it for now when it comes to the darkness of the eyelid and do second layer of burnishing. I mean blending, not burnishing. I'm so used to saying the word burnishing because I work with colored pencils so much now. But this is blending. And I don't mind if it's not completely smooth because skin always has texture to it, so I don't mind if that automatically happens. I do want to make sure that I'm always or working circular or working in the direction of the fur. Okay, so I feel it's dark enough now. Now I can move on to the fur again because now I can see how much darker I can go with the fur, and I can go darker, especially with the shadows in between the hairs. I'm going to get my A to B really sharp. Going to start working again here, just on that transition from the skin into the fur. I'm going to darken up those shadows. Looking at the direction of the fur very closely. I think I need like a paper to put my hand on. I don't want to smudge my drawing. Then I'm going to darken up this shadow at the start of the eyebrow. It's not a real eyebrow, of course, but it looks like it. They can express themselves quite well, eyebrows, I feel. I'm not being too neat, too tidy with this fur. The hairs are going in all kinds of directions. The hairs change all the time, so it doesn't need to be perfect. But I do want to get the texture right. here at the lighter part, I also put in some darker hairs, or darker shadows actually, but I use longer strokes and with a little less pressure. So every few seconds I take a quick moment to look at the reference and look at my drawing overall. See if the values are correct. If not, I go back in. Just darken up some areas. Now going underneath again. Darken up some of those shadows as well. Then I'm going to move down and continue drawing those shadows, a little less dark, but still quite firm. So I'm only drawing the shadows in between the hairs now. So by leaving open those spaces, you create the illusion of light hairs on very dark skin. And actually we have a shadow right there. So I'm going to lightly sketch out. It's only a subtle shadow, but every dog has it. And then on that shadow and on that same line, the fur is getting darker again. So I put down a very light base layer. Just doing that with 8B. Some artists are really for, working from, the hardest pencil to the softest pencil. I just go in with whatever feels good. So I'm just going in with 8B straight away because it's easily blendable and I can create a base tone faster. How far should I take it, the fur? I think I'm going to stop right there at that shadow, and then I'll also do maybe a little bit here and then a tiny bit above the eyebrow, but not sure. Drawing in the shadow above the eyebrow now. Needs to be quite a lot darker. Than the actual fur there. And I just keep drawing lines and I leave open spaces between those lines so I can create the illusion of the lighter hairs overlapping the darker area. And I think I'm going to fade out the fur then. So I'm taking that shadow a little further and then I'm going to blend it out with the blending stump. Still using 8B. Then here we have the fur coming from the nose. So that's going like in this direction. Like that. And then going upwards and then around the eye and then over the forehead like that. Then it comes together with this little piece of fur from the eye. So I'm mapping out this fur real quick, because these two streams of fur are coming together. You have a shadow here. And then here on the side of the nose, the fur is changing direction. And then it's actually coming together with the fur from under the eye. Okay, yep. Want to do some burnishing? No, some blending. Let's add some more detail real quick. I want to do some blending, yep. Under the eye. Although the fur is pretty light here, it's still not completely white, so I'm going to give it a light layer. I think I want to fade this out a little bit as well. My pressure is still not high because I do want to use the eraser after this to pull out some lighter hairs. But I do want to darken up the whole base tone of the fur. Alright, so that's blended. I'm going to take the Tombow now before I'm going in and add the final dark details. I really can't talk anymore. So I take the Tombow Mono Zero eraser and a knife. You can use any sharp knife, and then cut it off. To a sharp point. I always cut it off a bit diagonally, so you get a really nice point to work with. And I'm going to pull out some of the very light hairs that I see. I see some above the eye right there. Also pulling out some lighter hairs on the eyebrow. And on the nose. Then I'm pulling out some highlights on the skin as well. Already creating some of the skin texture. Not the brightest highlights, but just the texture. Okay, I've pulled out some light hairs now, and now I can go back in and darken up around those light hairs. Which I'm definitely going to do because I still feel overall the fur is too light. Too light and too plain. So now I'm going to just darken up the fur, especially here on the bottom. Using 2B now. Not 8B, 2B, because I have a little bit more control. And then going back into the eyebrow and doing some extra detailing. Also around those white hairs I pulled out. By darkening up around them, those hairs will stand out better as well. and spending some more time on defining the shapes of the highlights, which is going to add more realism to the drawing as well. Actually, I do feel like darkening up the eyelids some more. So I'm going to switch to 8B again. Actually, I can keep on working on this for many more hours, but I think I'll do like half an hour and have it finished. Going back in now and darken up the shadows. And I'm going to darken up the eyelids as well. I want to darken up this part, the inner corner. Alright, I like that. Some more contrast in there. All right, we're getting closer to the finish line. So now it's just a matter of darkening up until I get the right amount of depth in my drawing. Then we also need to draw in the whiskers. You can see some on the eyebrow. We'll need to do that later. Let's first make sure that the fur is finished. Maybe one more time. A little bit of blending. Don't want to fade out all the details, but I do want to get rid of the texture of the paper a little bit more. So very lightly blending this once more. Okay. Alright, so I want to get the 8 to be really sharp now. Okay, I'm going to draw in the whiskers, which are growing from here, the dark part of the eyebrow. So the shadow just below the eyebrow. And you can see them, they are growing like towards us, so they are not pretty long. Here's one which is like curling a bit. Alright, so we're getting to the final details now. And I also want to put in some highlights, some very bright ones. You could have done that by just drawing around the highlights as well and just leave open those areas. But I'm going to use the Jelly Roll pen because I was too lazy to draw around the highlights. That would have been a lot more time consuming. So I'm going to take the white Jelly Roll pen. I have it right here. And I always test it out on my hand to see if enough ink comes out. And then I just tap it on. I always hold it a bit vertically, otherwise it won't work. So then I just draw on all those little dots. Alright, so that's it for the highlights. Now I feel like the white of the eye can be a little darker, so I'm going to carefully darken that up. Don't want to make it too dark. Now it just comes down to adding the final details. So just look at your own drawing as well. See if it needs any adjusting. What I could do is take a colored pencil, a black one, and darken up the darkest areas with that. What should I do? Should I do that or not? Maybe it's also good to just keep it 100% graphite. Because I've been criticized because of that before once, for using like black colored pencil in my graphite work. It was looked at as cheating, and I don't think it's cheating. I don't believe that, but I might just leave this one in graphite. Starting to lose my voice now as well. So sorry for that. Almost done. Some final little details. Alright, I'll call this done. Maybe a little bit more detail on the skin by drawing dark shadows next to the highlights to make them stand out more. Alright, done. I hope you liked this tutorial. Let me know what you think of it. If you've drawn along, let me know your results. Share them with me here on Patreon or on social media, Instagram, Facebook. You can even email them to me. I just like seeing your results. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I had so much fun drawing this one. I should do more graphite. It's been a long time since I did one in graphite. I'm so sorry for my voice. I think it's because it's late. I will put the reference photo in the attachments and the material list. And then I'll see you in the next tutorial, hopefully. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.